For decades, the story was always the same. First came the war, and then, eventually, came the Reconstruction.
For decades, the story was always the same. First came the war, and then, eventually, came the Reconstruction.
But now, that entire model is being flipped on its head. Reconstruction is being structured before stability even arrives.
And it's all being orchestrated by a brand new entity with a staggering $10 billion pledged to its name, under something called the Board of Peace. So you see, the real question isn't if a place like Gaza will be rebuilt. The real question is, who controls the architecture of that rebuilding?
You're watching Voice on Pages, where global power, capital, and institutions are decoded beneath the headlines. Subscribe if you want to understand how the world is really shifting.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at this $10 billion board itself. Then, we'll trace how we got here, from simple grants to complex governance. We'll unpack how capital literally becomes control, and we'll follow the money down what's called the Reconstruction value chain. And this is important. We'll see why this is about a system, not a conspiracy. And finally, we'll see how this all points to a brand new reality. Peace itself being treated as a managed asset.
All right, first up, let's really dig into this new entity at the heart of it all. What exactly is this Board of Peace?
So you've got this headline number, this huge $10 billion pledge from the US, plus another $7 billion or so from other international partners. But, and this is a really big but, a pledge is just a political promise, right? It's not cash sitting in a bank account. The real power, the real story, is in how and when that money actually gets released. And when you look at how this board is set up, it's pretty unique. For starters, it's got the UN's endorsement, but, and this is critical, it is not controlled by the UN. This thing is autonomous. Want a permanent seat at the table? You need to cough up $1 billion. Yeah, it's basically a pay-to-play system for governance. It's even been granted its own legal personality. Think of it like a corporation that can sign its own deals, totally independent of any single country, and it holds all the power over where the money goes. But maybe the most crucial part, its mandate is specifically designed to be expandable. It can grow way beyond its original mission.
So what does this all add up to? Look, the big takeaway here is that this isn't your grandma's relief fund. We're talking about a fundamental shift, away from just distributing aid to creating a structure of governed institutional capital.
So you might be asking, how on earth did we get here? Because a model this sophisticated doesn't just pop up overnight. No, it's actually been decades in the making.
I mean, just look at the evolution. Back in the 40s, you had something like the Marshall Plan. Super direct, grant-based aid. Simple. Then by the 80s, you get the IMF and the World Bank introducing loans with all these strings attached, policy conditions. Fast forward to the 2000s, and it's all about public-private partnerships and these concession models. And that brings us to today, with the Board of Peace. You can see the pattern, right? Aid has slowly but surely been transformed into a form of structured, governed capital. And look, this whole evolution, it's not just about finding more efficient ways to spend money. No, this is about power. So let's peel back the layers and look at the actual mechanisms that turn this pile of capital into real-world control.
Right, so how exactly does having control of the money translate into actual power on the ground? Because it's so much more than just signing a check. It's all about having a toolkit of leverage. Think about it. They can make releasing the funds conditional on, say, demilitarization or hitting certain political targets. Since the money's all in US dollars, that creates this immense economic leverage. Then there's the board itself. It's composed of the big donors, which means local voices and representation are pretty limited. And maybe the most subtle tool of all, just the timing of the funding. Releasing or withholding money becomes this powerful lever to influence behavior and make sure everyone gets in line.
If you care about how money quietly shapes global power, subscribe. This is where we decode it.
All right, so we keep talking about this massive $10 billion number, but where does that cash actually end up? Because I can promise you, it's almost never a straight line from the donor to the people who need it.
Yeah, it's way more helpful to think of it like a value chain. So, step one, the big pledge gets announced. Everyone cheers. But before a single bag of cement is bought, you've got layers and layers of security firms, consultants, and administrators all taking their cut. We saw this in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. That overhead can eat up a shocking amount of the money. Then the big money contracts get awarded, and guess who often gets them? Yep, large firms from the very same countries that donated the money. This creates this kind of feedback loop where the aid money is basically recycled right back into the donor economies. and that explains the massive gap you always see between the headline pledge number and the actual liquid cash that makes it to the ground.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Hearing all this, it sounds like some kind of shadowy, backroom conspiracy. But that's actually missing the more subtle and frankly more important point here. This is about the system's design, not necessarily evil intent.
Let's get really clear on this distinction because it's key. On one side, you have actual criminal behavior, right? Like theft, bribery, corruption. We're not necessarily talking about that. We're talking about institutional design. It's about the built-in incentives, the bureaucratic rules that shape where the money goes, even when everyone is technically playing by the book. For example, a rule might say you need a 100-page proposal to get funding. Well, a giant multinational firm has a whole department for that. A local contractor? No way. The rule itself might be well-intentioned, but the result is that capital flows away from the local economy. See the difference? It's the design of the system itself.
So, when you put all these pieces together, the autonomous board, the financial leverage, this whole value chain thing, you start to see a really profound new reality taking shape.
This new model, it's like a fortress of influence. The board's charter is designed to be expandable so it can just keep growing. The pay-to-play membership locks in the power of the donors, which gives them the keys to long-term deals on really critical infrastructure. We're talking ports, energy grids, you name it. And, like any big institution, this board has a built-in incentive to keep itself relevant. And that forces you to ask a pretty tough question, right? Does a system like this actually need a certain level of manageable instability to justify its own existence?
And really, this is what it all boils down to. When billions of dollars are moving through these kinds of executive boards, instead of going directly to citizens or their own governments, power moves right along with them.
This isn't a conspiracy. It isn't necessarily corruption. It's institutional design. When billions move through boards instead of directly to citizens, power moves with them. Reconstruction is no longer just rebuilding. It's capital structuring. And capital structuring determines who holds influence long after the rubble is cleared. This is Voice on Pages. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this analysis, consider buying me a coffee. It helps keep this channel independent. Subscribe if you want to understand how power really moves beneath the headlines. See you in the next one.